One Step Ahead by Lundquist and Beslick.
Welcome to One Step Ahead Radio, the cooperation with the strategic communication agency, one of the leading ones in Italy, out of Milano, and myself. The idea is to bring you forward the insights, news, views across the world that will enable you to have a better understanding on sustainable transition as such, but also give you a bit of a food for thought in terms of where the market is really going and what is really happening. As I said before, most of the focus needs to be related to two major markets. One is, of course, the American one, and the second one is in China. The third one in Europe is more about compromise between the two big powers. But in general, one of the questions that I posed in an invite for this call, which will end in 8 minutes, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible, and hopefully we'll get you to participate in the next one, next Friday, is the fact that many corporates have difficulties to showcase and understand and show how they make money on sustainability. One of the core reasons for that when we meet them as investors is that when we pose the question, how do you actually make money of this? Most of the time, what we receive is a blank silence. And that is related more or less, I think, to the fact that most of what is done in the companies across the world right now is related to disclosure. And it's been spurred by regulation in European Union, and of course regulation in the US, where companies are required to disclose their views and their actions on sustainability side, but really not how they change and shift their business models and their strategy and how they do that in relation to their products and services. So when we pose the question, we usually don't get the answer. And that would mean behind the closed doors, what we very often hear, it's a cost-related thing. It is a cost. It's unclear how they can get paid for it. It's something they do because they believe there is a certain value to it. And in that case, when there is a certain value to it, of course, there are agencies around the world that have done studies, Accenture, many others, claiming that the companies that are really in the top of these indices on sustainability disclosure would generate about 25% or 21% more EBITDA for investors going forward if they really sort of deploy this in the way how they value companies. However, for the investors, for any company out there working with this, it's very important to understand, for us to understand how this is clearly linked to your business model and how do you as a company make money on this. That includes, of course, the relationship that the company has to their clients, customers, and business partners, because in many cases, even as investors, when we deploy these kind of questions and meet the companies, we have big difficulties to understand how much do clients actually understand what companies are doing on sustainability level and why they are doing this. As well, what is the difference in the value for a client between the product that is sustainable and the product that is not? Of course, this is very much related to also ability of the companies to shift the business models. And looking at the numbers, and especially in the aviation industry, which is a very interesting industry for most of us because we are using it, you have probably seen that most of the aviation companies around the world are withdrawing from their claims and commitments to reach climate targets by 2030. The mere reason for that is the lack of sustainable fossil fuels, which represent today 1.5% of available kerosene jet fuels around the world. The pricing is, of course, the big issue for them. But what is also interesting is that kerosene or jet fuel is not taxed across the world. So companies are really not paying what they are supposed to pay, which is something that has been addressed now lately in a discussion that is coming up in October. And that discussion is going to take place in South America. It's a biodiversity summit where the countries around the world that have signed the biodiversity pledges are acting in a way right now and sending messages to corporate sectors to stop doing biopiracy. It's a new term, which means that the companies and, of course, economic system that we run in underlying economic system is unlawfully, or how could we call it, unaccounting the costs that are related to exploring, using the bioservices across the world to produce their products and services. This is going to be a big topic on this biodiversity conference happening. And of course, there's a lot of debate. And one of the big things that will be discussed on the biodiversity conference in South America is the proposal by many developing countries that the corporates in pharmaceutical, agriculture, food sector, and many others that are heavily dependent on biodiversity will need to pay money to certain funds that will then be used by these governments to invest in change of the way how the treatment of biodiversity is done in these countries. Of course, there is a pushback from Switzerland, of course, pushback from Japan and some other countries that don't believe that this is the right way of doing it. As you can probably see, what is happening around the world is there are various initiatives on how to bring in the externalities into the pricing scheme of economic model, and there are various ways around that. So I think we should be happy that this is happening, and it's good that it's moving forward. However, one thing that is not really moving forward and has been outed quite a lot last couple of days is the fact there is a massive disinformation campaign slowing global transition to green energy. There is a United Nations, I think one of the Assistant Secretary General, Selvin Hart, that has been out there saying that this is something that is really stopping, in many ways also destroying the ability of the world to shift because of the massive fossil fuel campaign across the world, especially in developing nations, where there is a price and basically inability of the world to shift used as excuse, mostly related to cost for many of these countries to withdraw their activities and also withdraw their targets from transforming the economies. And this is a very dangerous thing, and you can probably see it across the world and in different sectors. There is a significant pushback. There is a walk back on many of these climate commitments, and it is posing a narrative, I think, in the world today where we almost don't feel there is no spark anymore in relation to a sustainable transition. Many countries and many people, even many companies, are feeling that this is something that it's not going to happen. Now, you can see the evidence of that because there are companies in the world, the big ones like Chevron and like many others. Chevron has recently decided to move the head offices, I think, from California to Texas, something that Elon Musk has done before. And the reason why 5 big American oil and gas companies have moved from California to Texas recently has been related to the fact that they've been subject to a very heavy lawsuits, accusations on these companies from a climate activists in the country, in these states in the US, basically putting them in a very, very difficult position. And instead of tackling with these issues, they're actually moving out the headquarters and jurisdiction, or where they can be accused for a certain type of climate-related things. Now, I wanted to give you, and I was, of course, talking much more before I actually discovered there was no sound, and I'm very, very sorry for that. I will try to expand it if you can bear with me for just a couple of minutes. We are heading the sort of a deadline, but I'll do it a bit more, a couple of more minutes to give you a bit of a flavor of what's going on in China, which I think is a relevant market to follow. So China is expanding its nuclear capacity and has been doing in the last 10 years what the US took 40 years to complete, which is to build 22 new nuclear power plants in a record time. And China is not doing only that. What they're doing, which is very scary, is that they're expanding their deep sea mining exercises, and they're doing it through the authorities that are available. So International Sea Authority is the one that is issuing licensing around the world. And of course, this organization is supported by donors, and China is the biggest donor of this organization, as has received recently, I think, 32 new licenses to explore the seabed across the world, including the one that is fairly close to the American Pacific coast, not so far away from the US, where they are expected to dig after minerals and minerals and metals that are available on the sea level, on the seabeds, in order to support their transition and the world's transition to more sustainable economy. This is relevant for us because China is, of course, producing most of the solar capacity in the world, and is the country that in many cases is doing what they can politically and economically and for many other reasons in relation to their own population to expand the capacity of China to sustain its ability to produce renewable energy components, not only for themselves, for the rest of the world. However, what is also relevant to mention that these things are not in any way really regulated, and we are still not clear about what does it mean in practical terms, in terms of the environmental protection, but also other things related to China. China is, of course, doing other things in other parts of the world, and if you're looking at the influence map of the China in the south part of the world, they are becoming more influential across the south parts of the world, in many countries where they are doing direct investment investments from Serbia, Kazakhstan, and many others, where they are exploring the ways how to support their view on sustainable development, but also the political agenda. In the US, the situation is, of course, a bit different. We have this upcoming election, and for many people out there working with sustainability, getting questioned if the US administration in one favor or another will make any difference. I would like to inform you that most likely there will be no big differences. Of course, if you look at the numbers, there is 1/4 of American Congress that is climate deniers. The big question is what the rest is doing. The fact that America is continuing to explore and increasing its oil and gas production across the world is indicating only one thing: the economic the politics in the US is run by US economy, and this is a bit of an opposite thing in China, and it will most likely not lead to any substantial change in the course. Of course, symbolic actions and tactical things will be improved in the US depending on who wins, or it will be worsened. But in the other way, I think the underlying sort of economic engine of US in essence is not looking to change for the next coming 10 years. What is also interesting, before I sort of end this update, and I believe again that we will be able to do this technically better next time, is the fact that Azerbaijan, which is the host of a next COP conference, is increasing its flaring activities across the world. For you not knowing what flaring is, it is the technical sort of a thing which is related to oil drilling. Usually when you drill for oil, you will hit the gas first, and this gas across the world in different geographies is flared. It's basically burned out. The flaring is a very serious environmental and climate related issue across the world. It has been on the agenda for many years. There are no clear solutions. The oil and gas companies see it as a very expensive thing to start to do something on infrastructure development to capture and use it, because it could be captured and used, and we could actually, in many ways, decrease the amount of new gas that needs to be explored. However, this is not on the agenda right now, and many people around the world are wondering why the flaring, of course, is increasing. And it is increasing, my friends, because the oil and gas extraction across the world has been increasing rapidly over the last couple of years. The last news for this week will, of course, be that Glencore, one of the biggest mining companies in the world, previously had an idea to take out the coal business out of the equation of the corporate structure they have and spin it off. Unfortunately, they have not done that, and they are continuing to investing in coal and extracting coal. And the main reason for that is that the stakeholders of Glencore, which are many of our pension funds, mine and yours and many others, are not really interested in sort of an ESG angle of these investments, but rather maximize financial profit in the short term for us and for generations to come. The question is, who gave them a responsibility or accountability to do that? That's another thing. And of course, there is one peculiar thing. I will end up with that. And the peculiar thing is that in the latest calls with the market, the Indian companies across the Indian market are quoting climate change and heat on every second call with investors as the core reason why the Indian companies in many cases have underperformed in relation to expectations they have. So the big question is, of course, will the climate change, the physical risks in many countries, including this one in India, now be seen from the market as something that will have a physically tangible impact on the capacity of the companies to deliver on their results? Thank you very much for participation.